tonight, but I'll work on that and get that to you guys, make it available. We're in Daniel chapter 5. I hope everybody's having a good week. Everybody having a good week? Temperature dropped today, didn't it? Boy, yesterday I was enjoying that 90 degrees, and then I was wondering where my coat was this morning. I was chilled big time, and still the wind's got some bite to it, but it looks pretty outside. I'm looking for warmer weather. It's full moon. I could see on the bus route this morning the moon set and the sunrise. That was pretty cool. Speaking of sunrise service at Newkirk at 7. So far, it's Terrell and I going. I don't know if any of y'all were planning on going from Ponca, but if you're wanting to go from here, I'm offering to take the bus if you'd like to get up that early, Kevin. But we may just take a car. Coach, you're driving. We'll go over there, and I'll be doing one of the prayers for the sunrise service. So Easter's coming up, and then let's see, anything else? I guess that's about it for what I can think of coming up. We're in Daniel chapter 5, and what I was saying was will not be too many more chapters till we're out of the familiar territory, and we'll be going into somewhat, I would think for some, is probably the uncharted territory, the parts of Daniel that's more apocalyptic. And you probably everybody here has read all through Daniel and kind of know where we're going there, but we're kind of leaving the children Bible stories behind here in just a little bit. We'll have the one next week, of course. But Daniel chapter 5, one of the, what I would rank as, for the book of Daniel, probably the top third story. I think the most popular story, I'm thinking in terms of children, okay? The most popular story of Daniel is the lion's den, and that's next week. I think that second one would be Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, fiery furnace. I think this is the third one. I don't remember the publishing company, but I had the children's Bible that most people my age range had. I still have it to this day. It's in a box down the basement. The cover is, the front cover is kind of off, but I've got it on there. And some grew up maybe with the Hurlburt's brand of children's Bible. That was anybody know what a Hurlburt's? That was kind of hard to pronounce. That's a famous children's Bible kind of before my time. And maybe there were some other children's Bible. And today, there's updated ones, the Adventure Bible and some others, our Sunday school teachers would know better what's out there today. But I grew up with that Bible, hearing all these stories for the first time, thinking this is exactly what Daniel looked like. This is what Jonah looked like. This is what that whale looked like. This is what Moses looked like. And still to this day, I still think of probably all the biblical characters looking like white Anglo-Saxon people, it's just the way that the rendition of all these stories are depicted in the way we would be familiar with. And I'm not saying that that's bad. Just realize there's a lot of gap between what's illustrated for a child to what reality is. And we were thinking about this last Sunday morning in my class. Scott Harmon and I are both kind of co-teaching a class topic in the multipurpose room on the top 10 things of the Bible, and we've done top 10 murders, we've done top 10 excuses, top 10, I think this week is mysteries. And I've seen a lot of discussion, by the way, on the GroupMe app. I think Mom put something out today on it, but we need to get that going. But anyway, what I was mentioning last Sunday was it's funny how we take a story like Noah and the flood and we make it cute, and we dress up children's nurseries, the baby toddler, when Landon was born. We did Noah's Ark as a theme for his room. Had the border around. I even had the fancy little chair rail up there just to give it a nice little dimensional border. It was really cool. Had a good miter saw. I had just bought that time. Makita, missed that saw. Anyway, but think about that story. it was one of the most catastrophic, disastrous events in all of history. But you don't see that, do you, in children's Bible stories? I mean, here are the cute animals, one by one in pairs. Here's Noah building the ark, and his sons are helping him. And you got the rainbow and the dove and all these cute stories, when in reality there were people outside the ark probably trying to bang on the door getting in and drowning. And like the scene from Titanic, as it further went on raining and flooding, that sound would start dying out. I mean, that's just using our imagination about that, but it really was a destruction event. So there's a large gap. That's my point. A large gap between children Bible story illustrations versus reality. So the handwriting on the wall, I can remember this. I can still picture this in my mind's eye of how that looked in my children's Bible that's down in the basement there, about the hand that just appeared. And it's a finger of God writing many, many tekel upharsin. I think in our newer versions it's Perez instead of upharsin, but I can see those words. And I'm thinking, what would you have done if you'd been there at that party Belshazzar was throwing, and how would you have reacted? And what if you'd been him? And I think I probably would have reacted in the same way he did. But that's our story for tonight. So let's start by saying that it appears when we get to chapter 5 that Nebuchadnezzar has been gone. And it seems to me it's implied he's been gone for a few years. There's a gap from chapter 4 to chapter 5. And his son Belshazzar, not to be confused with Belteshazzar, Daniel's Babylonian name, but Belshazzar, his son, is the king that's reigning. And so the other thing that I also notice, and you'll notice, kind of like back in chapter 3, where's Daniel? It seems now in this gap between Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar, Daniel is also not to be found, or he will be found in this story, but Belshazzar has no knowledge of him. That's interesting to me, that for years, where's Daniel been lying low at? It doesn't seem that he has a position now. And when he does get a position, it's third rank. It doesn't seem to be as elevated as it was under Nebuchadnezzar's command. Wasn't he second in rank? It's third rank now. And there's no mention of Shadrach, Meshach, or Abednego from here on. So we just have Daniel. There's a lot of assumptions we can make, but that's, why waste time making a bunch of assumptions about things we don't know? But these are just some observations. So let's look at Daniel chapter 5. Again, I don't have a study sheet for us tonight. I'll have one, and I'll put the observations down. And I do have discussion questions, and that'll come on the sheet so that you'll have it for your collection later. But Belshazzar decides he's going to throw a great banquet. He's kind of following in the footsteps of his father in wanting to invite, and this is for the nobles. He wants to kind of put on a show. And how he does that is he says, okay, I want all my nobles here, and let's go get all the gold goblets, cups, and all that stuff that my father had taken from the temple back in the captivity when he captured all the Israelites, and let's go and let's drink from these cups. And he's talking about a party, and it's for his nobles, it's for the concubines, it's for the wives, and they bring that all in, and they're drinking. And in verse 4, as they drank the wine, they praised the gods of gold and silver, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone. So they're praising these material goods, the gods of these material goods. Now, I want to stop there and tell you that, okay, obviously this is idolatry, even though it's not saying that they've made an idol of these items, but that certainly are items that idols were made of. Many times idols started off as a chunk of wood overlaid with gold or silver, or it's pure gold. But they're talking about praising the gods of these products. Now let me ask you a question tonight. Is there a God of gold? Yes, there is. I thought somebody would say no, but you're right. There is a God of silver, isn't there? But it's the same God, right? Is there a God of bronze? Is there a God of 2x4s? Well, right. We don't know if Home Depot or Lowe's knows that or not, right? But there certainly is the God who created all that stuff, right? Go ahead, Sam. So, yeah, there is a God of this stuff. There's a, and of course, we can talk about man-made fabrics and things and all that, but man-made all start with somewhere far back, raw material God provided, right? There's nothing we bring into this world, that's what Job said. So there's no synthetic stuff, there's no hybrid stuff, there's no cloning that we can achieve that makes material that's not in existence beforehand to all of a sudden come into existence. That can only be done by God, the Creator. Man can make, only God can create. Now, I'm not talking about the creative process necessarily, but if you were to go that route in an abstract way, even the creative process, if you write a song, if you paint a painting, you're using mediums that is going back to be credited to God and your talent and your skill. And some people might think, okay, well, I'm going to create a song. I'm going to write a song. Guess what? Your influence, I don't care how original you think that is. You're influenced by other people who've written songs. I don't care how original you think your painting is. You are influenced by other people that did paintings. I'd go as far as to say Picasso, as far off the wall and different as he was in all his paintings, he was influenced by other people's paintings. In the entertainment industry that, I kind of dabble with the magic and illusion stuff, there's a phrase that we commonly hear, we all stand on the shoulders of giants. Do you agree with that? And even the giants stood on shoulders of giants. But that all goes back to God-given talents. Does that make sense? That we all have these God-given talents. So everything we have, even if it's not a material thing, it's still an asset that we have, we give the credit to God. Well, Belshazzar and his partiers, they're giving credit to these other gods. And then verse 5, suddenly, this is interruption, right? Right in the midst of this celebration. Praise the God of the gold of this goblet. And look, on that wall. Now, I know what my children's Bible showed. Do you think this was big enough for everybody in the room to see? I tend to think it was. It's probably not something you had to go, what does that say? This is probably as plain as day, okay? And it gets everyone's attention. Does God know how to get everyone's attention? Oh, yeah, you bet He does. And it makes them stop in their tracks, and this finger, and I don't know what you think you're seeing. We could easily imagine, because we have the ability to project an image, that this looked like a projected image. And kind of the way that maybe my children's Bible would lend it is it looks like a painting that's animated. But I want you to imagine this being a real hand-looking hand with flesh, that you could even see the hair on that hand. And somewhere the rest of the body's not attached, but you see that hand. And that hand has got that finger on the wall, and it's writing that message. And what's being written? What's the medium? Think about that. It doesn't say anything about ink, pencil, crayon, marker, dry erase, paint. Go ahead. And that's what I'm trying to bring up, is this hand is so forceful, it could leave an engraving behind on that wall. Now, this is another thing, and again, this is just imagination. A lot of us are, we always get kind of creeped out when you hear the fingernail scrape across a chalkboard. Think of if there had been a sound of this. What if it's on the cinder block, I mean, this gets your attention. Sounds like I had a hairball or something to hack at. That's not a very good sound effect, sorry. But whatever it is, I want you to imagine that scene, both sight and sound, okay? And that hand is visible. And so this is suddenly, and it's the fingers of a human hand appear and wrote on the plaster of the wall near the lampstand. That means it could be lit up, it's seen, right, in the royal palace. The king watched the hand as it wrote. So it's not just a message that appears, like in my children's Bible, the whole message is depicted. It starts off, I'm going to go ahead and walk over here. Well, that camera's going to get me off the, sorry guys on live. If I were to do this, I've got your attention, but you have no clue what's happening. I may be drawing a stick figure, right? But as this goes, there's a little bit of dramatic anticipation that God is doing here. I want you to imagine that. It's being revealed gradually. So as you're continuing watching that, as he's seeing it, and then you see the first word formed, mene. And by the way, they don't know what it means, because he's going to have to get his astrologers and magicians and all these other wise guys to come tell me what that means. This is not in a known language for them, okay? This is not Babylonian. So you see that word, and then you see the next word, and then you see a third word, okay? When that happens, it says that as the king watched, the hand writes. It says in verse 6. Somebody read verse 6 for me. Has that ever happened to you? How many of you ever had to give a speech in school? I mean, I haven't heard that it's changed, but the number one fear is the fear of public speaking. It was for years. Do y'all like giving speeches? I mean, yeah, you do good too. You do very well. You do good. You do well. You do, yeah, you're great. But a lot of people, they don't like getting in front of people. Are you that way, Kevin? Okay. There's just some people that are gifted and some people that are not, and that's fine. But it's kind of like I've seen people give a speech, and they are nervous as a hen. And have you ever seen anybody whose knees knocked? I've seen it depicted in the movies maybe where, you have, I don't know, I'm just trying to think of somebody that was good at trying to give that little, for some reason, Jerry Lewis is coming in mind where he was probably playing the absent, Don Knotts, oh yeah, Don Knotts. Whether it's playing the Andy Griffith Show or the Apple Dumpling Gang or whatever it was, he is, or didn't he play that when he turned into the fish? What was that one? The Amazing Mr. Olympic. Well, anyway, he's this guy, I don't know what to do here. And knees knocking, you'd think he'd hear that. I've seen people sweating bullets trying to give a speech. And if it's not that, I've seen people be nervous at whatever it was they're doing, and they are frightened. And maybe right before they jump out of a plane to go skydiving or some dare thing like that, I've seen that. His face is pale. He is frightened, obviously, and his knees are knocking. His knees become weak. His legs become weak, and his knees are knocking. Verse 7. The king summoned the enchanters, astrologers, diviners. Whoever reads this writing and tells me what it means will be clothed in purple, have a gold chain placed around his neck. He'll be made the third highest ruler in the kingdom. Now, I want to tell you, it's one thing to walk in the room and see graffiti on the wall and think, okay, that's interesting. I wonder who was here last night. This is different, though, because he actually sees it being written, and that's the alarming part. But when he comes to this realization, okay, I got to know what that means, because this I've never seen before. I've got to know what he's written. What has he written? So he's trying to find that out. These kings, wise men, cannot read the writing. It's not Babylonian. I know that because, remember, even the Hebrew children caught into captivity were taught the language and the different languages the Babylonians knew. They were very knowledgeable. So this was totally different. And obviously can't tell what it means if they can't see what it says. Verse 9. He becomes more terrified because now he knows he can't get the answers from the wisest people he has in the kingdom. The queen, hearing the voices of the king and his nobles, came into the banquet hall. "May the king live forever," she said. "Don't be alarmed. Don't look so pale. There's a man in your kingdom who has the spirit of the holy gods in him. In the time of your father, he was found to have insight and intelligence and wisdom like that of the gods. Your father, King Nebuchadnezzar, appointed him chief of the magicians, enchanters, astrologers, and diviners. He did this because Daniel, whom the king called Belteshazzar, was found to have a keen mind and knowledge and understanding, and also the ability to interpret dreams, explain riddles, and solve difficult problems. Call for Daniel, and he will tell you what the writing means." The queen knows more than the king about what Nebuchadnezzar went through. What does that tell you about Belshazzar right now? It doesn't seem to me that he has a lot of invested interest in how he's come to power, about all that his dad... He knows, hey, let's get the gold my dad stole. But he doesn't have a lot of interest in the history and the background to his own kingdom. That his wife knows more than him about what events took place back in the day. She has more knowledge of Daniel. And it doesn't seem to me that he's ever heard of Daniel until now. Daniel's brought in, verse 13. "Are you Daniel, one of the exiles my father brought from Judah? I've heard that you have the Spirit of God is in you, and you have insight, intelligence, and outstanding wisdom." It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Where's Daniel been all this time? Just elusive and, all this rapport from before. It makes me think, this is conjecture, but I think it's very plausible, that there might have been a falling out between Belshazzar and Nebuchadnezzar, so that whatever Nebuchadnezzar had trusted in, whatever people he had confided in, Belshazzar has dispensed with that. He has his own guys. It makes me think that Daniel's fallen through the cracks. I mean, I know you get that impression too. But now he says, okay, I'm going to give all this stuff to you, and I'll make you third highest ruler if you can tell me what this says. And Daniel in verse 17 says, you can keep that stuff, but I will read the writing for you and tell you what it means. And then he says, verse 18, "Your majesty, the Most High God, gave your father Nebuchadnezzar sovereignty and greatness and glory and splendor." And then he tells Belshazzar the story of his father's demise when he became arrogant, what we looked at last time. But that when he humbled himself, he acknowledged God was most high and sovereign. Verse 22, "But you, Belshazzar, have not humbled yourself." And this is interesting. "Though you knew all this." It doesn't sound like Belshazzar is quite in the dark as he's letting on, that either this has been suppressed, which is easily done. You can let power go to your head and you forget how you got to a position. And it can be crowded out by your own selfish desires. Verse 23, "Instead, you've set yourself up against the Lord of heaven. You had the goblets from this brought to you, you and your nobles, your wives, your concubines. You praised the gods of silver, gold, and all that. But you did not honor the God. This is the ending of verse 23. You did not honor the God who holds in his hand your life and all your ways. So, he tells them what it means. Many. God has numbered the days of your life, of your reign, and brought it to an end. Tekel. You've been weighed on the scales and found wanting. Peres, or Upharsin in the older versions. Your kingdom is divided, given to the Medes and Persians. Then at Belshazzar's command, Daniel was clothed in purple, a gold chain placed around his neck. He was proclaimed the third highest ruler in the kingdom. That very night, Belshazzar, king of the Babylonians, was killed. And Darius, the Mede, took over the kingdom at the age of 62. So Darius, or Darius, as some people say, is now culminating the next phase of the original dream that Nebuchadnezzar had of the head of gold. And now we're moving into the other part of the statue or the image he saw. All right? We'll stop there and just ask, what's your thoughts? What are the things you're pondering right now? What observations can you make that you'd like to share? Mm-hmm. Yeah, now we probably shouldn't make the assumption that he just came into command. I think he's probably been in rule for a while. He's established some things, but... Oh, yeah. Once the message is given, that doesn't take long at all. That night, right? Let me ask you a question. Does this sound familiar to you, to any other biblical narrative? Well, yeah, that was striking down dead at that moment, but, the husband and the wife, it was separately, but that would have been something. The feet that carried your spouse out the door is going to carry you out the door. To remind you of any other narrative. There's a narrative that I think it really closely resembles. That very night, something happened after he was told something. Yep. I will look at what I've done. I will build bigger barns. You fool. You don't even know that tonight your life will be demanded of you. And that is exactly the one that comes to my mind. There in Luke 12, I think it is. There's probably other examples of this too. We went through the Kings this last year. And, there's a lot of those where either Elijah or Elisha or one of the other prophets comes along and says something to one of the kings. This is going to happen, and it's fulfilled. Sometimes it takes a while. It takes maybe a generation or two before it gets fulfilled. But sometimes that fulfillment was very quickly too. It happened very quickly. We can think of, go ahead. Okay, yeah. I was thinking of Peter when, he has told Jesus after Jesus said, y'all will all betray me. Well, I'll die for you. And he says, this very night, you're going to deny me 3 times before the rooster crows. And that happens that night. So there's another immediate type revelation like that. Any other thoughts on this passage? Who killed Belshazzar? Well, I think the best guess answer is the Medes did. I mean, the Medes take over. They become the next world power. Now, they're inferior to the Babylonians, and it's short-lived. And I think it's Medes on the scene first, then it's Persians, but it's still considered Medes and Persians together, because the next guy that we have is Cyrus, and he's Persian. By the way, does everybody get a sense of where we're at geographically speaking? Where Babylon is modern-day Iraq. What would be modern-day Persia? Iran. So we're in that part of the country where this power is shifting around. It had gone from the Assyrians in the northern part down to this area here. So Darius is the guy who's going to be a part of the Daniel in the lion's den narrative. Anything else in this story tonight that you want to bring up? Why would Belshazzar want to show off to his nobles? Why all of a sudden, let's do this, let's have a party, bring up that gold stuff and all this stuff? Okay. Yeah, but this is the point I want to make. He doesn't really have anything he's bragging about that he's accomplished himself. He even says that. Let's bring up the gold that my dad got. It seems as though he's not been a very prominent leader, or he would have said, let's celebrate the victories I have. Just living off of daddy's money or daddy's success stories. There's no claim here other than I'm going to praise the gods of this silver and gold and stuff. And what Daniel says, well, you haven't humbled yourself. But he's not really got anything as far as, well, where's the proof that you've done anything successful? Yes, it is. Takes a lot of wine, doesn't it? Yes. Have you ever experienced somebody whose expressions, their mood goes from proud to panic-stricken as quickly as the text says Belshazzar's has done? Or maybe have you ever experienced something like that for yourself, where it's like the wind was just let out of the sail all of a sudden? I've seen, like in the sporting world, where it's a clock buzzer beater situation, and maybe the shot's fired and it goes in, and you think we won, but there's still like 2 seconds left, and you're celebrating, and the other team throws in the ball, and it's a long shot, and they make it, and you lose. You ever seen those situations? Or maybe the ref comes in and makes a call that doesn't go your way. You should have had the game. How many times do you hear people, we should have won that game, but those refs are to blame? And sometimes that's right. Yeah. And a ref, an umpire, or whatever you want to call it, and that's just a part of the sporting world, is you get bad calls and you're going to have to live with it. There needs to be improvements. Yes, I know that, but they're human, I remember the only time I ever reffed was for T-ball. Kids were great. I wish the parents had stayed home. Just stay home. Quit living vicariously through your kid for all the dashed hopes you had from your own personal athletic dreams. Just stay home, right? I'm being kind of crude, but I'm also kind of serious. Why do we have noise on the sound? Belshazzar's offering material wealth for an answer to his sign, isn't he? What does this teach us about the value of God's counsel? the robe, the other stuff that he has, that can't buy you the answer you want. God's counsel is worth more than that. I think Daniel realizes that. You can keep your stuff. What God wants you to know, I'm going to give it to you because God wants you to know it regardless of what you're paying. Now, that's not meaning that y'all should quit paying your preacher. Do not muzzle the ox, right? That's a verse of the Bible. Don't muzzle the ox. But seriously, though, the truth needs to be preached, not peddled. And you're asking for interpretation, you can't buy it. And of course, we have Simon the sorcerer who's trying to buy something in Acts, and may your money perish with you is what's the response to him. How does Daniel stay humble in this situation? Or not how does he stay humble, but what can you point to that shows he's remaining humble? Yeah. Yeah. You're saying it's me and I can do this by the gods that I have. Well, let me tell you, it's the God who made everything that gives this to me. And in his refusal of the things he wants, although he does get those things, he refuses them in the beginning, doesn't he? How did Daniel point out Belshazzar's fault? Well, he kind of tells the story. He uses this as a teachable moment, doesn't he? Where he says, your father, a long time ago, went through a period of time where he got arrogant. And God abased him. And God can abase the humble. Abase the proud. Make him humbled. And but you haven't learned that. And you're sitting over here riding the success stories of your father, but celebrating yourself and giving praise to these gods that don't even exist. You've not humbled yourself. And so he says, look at what you could have learned from your father, and you should have, because you knew this. You knew all this. Any other questions on that? Let me ask you this. I'm not looking for a sign from God. By the way, just so you'll know, the sermon this Easter is Here's Your Sign. Same title as tonight's lesson. I didn't plan it that way. It just worked out that way because as I'm working through Jonah this month, I wanted to put the Easter message in there, and I'm using the text that comes. I believe it's Matthew 12. I might be wrong. I need to look at the notes. But anyway, wherever it said Jesus is being asked for a sign, show us a sign. The only sign that will be given this generation is what? The sign of Jonah. As he was in the belly of the fish for 3 days, 3 nights, so will the Son of Man be. And then the sign of Solomon in all his glory and splendor. None other sign will be given to this generation. So that was why I thought, okay, well, here's your sign. So when I say, how would this work out today, when I break up the components of this message on the wall, I want us to kind of think, how would we paraphrase what's being said? Paraphrase and characterize, for example, the many part of the first word that's written. The one that says your days are numbered. How would we might paraphrase that? Or how would we summarize that for today to remind us, here's what we always need to remember. Go ahead, anybody. Time's up, okay. It's later than you think. That's good. I like that. Do you get to be here forever? Do you get to keep what you have forever? Is there anything you have right now besides your soul that you'll always have? Does anybody have a promise guarantee in writing that tomorrow will exist for you? Are your days numbered? And really, this is what's sobering to me. When you read in Hebrews 9:27, it is appointed once for man to die, then comes the judgment. Does God know the date of your death? Yeah. You know, that's kind of like, wow. I've got a birthday coming up. I may not get there. I may be talking about plans for my birthday, and God says, well, you know, you just don't, you just don't order. Just so you'll know, let's celebrate my birthday early, because it's later than you think, right? Go ahead, Sam.
This story, the story of the Jews in general and of us, comes back to if we don't learn or if we forget our history, we're bound.
Destined to repeat it. That's exactly right. So I'm reminded of James. In James 4, about verses 13 through 17, it's a famous, I know most of you are familiar with this. What is life? Well, what's his answer? A vapor or a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. Now that's the part we remember. What sometimes we don't remember is what prompted that point to be made. And it's back in 13 where James says, come now, you who say today or tomorrow we're going to go to such and such town, buy, sell, and get gain. And then the discussion goes, well, wait a minute. You don't even know what's going to happen. You don't know about tomorrow. You don't know that you have tomorrow. What is your life? And then the follow-up lesson is what we ought to do instead of thinking and taking for granted that we've got tomorrow in the bag when we don't, is we ought to learn to say, if the Lord wills, we will do this or that. Remember? And then it concludes with, everybody that knows to do the good ought to do the good. And if you don't, it's sin. A missed opportunity can be sin. Can you sin by doing nothing? Yep, that can be sin. Well, I didn't do anything. That's exactly what's wrong. You didn't do anything when you should have done something. A missed opportunity is a sin. You have sins of commission, you have sins of omission. That's the point James is making. So whenever we see what Belshazzar is getting this message, what's pertaining to him, we ought to also think, okay, that also pertains to us. Our days are numbered. Okay? It may not be that this night your life will be extinguished, or your power, your reign, or whatever you have, but at some point it comes to an end. Whatever you have can come to that end on earth. What about the tekel? The tekel that meant you have been weighed on the scales and found wanting. How would you paraphrase that today? Because we don't really use the word wanting like, I know we do in religious lingo, because the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. But we never really use that in today's modern language. How would you rephrase that to be what would make sense if you're trying to tell your neighbor the point of this lesson tonight? You didn't measure up. Okay. Those are all good. You're lacking. You didn't measure up. What'd you say? Your account is short. You're overdrawn. No, you're insufficient, or whatever it is. Now we're not talking about insult mode, like you're a few bricks shy of a full load or something like that. But you haven't reached your potential. You left things undone that should have been done. You have fallen short. That, by the way, is the definition of sin. Sin literally means missing the mark. And when you read Romans 3:23, it says, "For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God," is you haven't measured up. Does this not sound like some of the things Jesus is telling the 7 churches of Asia? After telling, here's what the good is, but here's what you're missing. One thing you lack. You're not measuring up when he says, one thing you lack. And he says that to 6 of the 7 churches. And I wonder if he might say that today to the Blackwell Church of Christ, or if he might say that today to Lanny Job, or to Don Knowles, or Gail Moore. One thing you lack. He most certainly could with me. I don't know about you guys, but I can evaluate myself and know I'm lacking in some areas. That there's an opportunity I might have missed here and there. That I'm neglecting something in my life. That message is for us too, isn't it? Just as many is, so is Tekel. Any other questions or discussions on that one? What about Perez or Upharsin? In today's terms, how would you paraphrase and characterize it, putting it contextually for us? Well, let's talk about material wealth. Okay, you have a deed with your name on it. You've got a title with your name on it. What happens when you die? With your stuff? And normally that would be who? What you thought really was worth something, and if only you could get on eBay and sell it, you'd make a killing. Kids don't care about it as much. And it's not, it's, you know what Cartha said a while ago can kind of be correlated to this. It's later than you think. It's also like it's not worth as much as you thought. That kind of plays into as well. Sometimes it could be. I mean, if you see the Antiques Roadshow every now and then, somebody bought something for $5 at a garage sale, and it's $5 million. That's never my luck. It is going to go to others than yourself. You don't get to take it with you. Now, we're talking about his reign. It's going to be divided. But usually, it's going to go to my kids. It's going to get divided. And as soon as it gets divided, it becomes diminished and not as appreciated. And would you agree with this? You seem to have a greater appreciation for the things you've earned and you work for yourself than that which is what's given to you. Do you think there's truth to that? He's a fine example of that. There's something interesting about the ending of the Gospel of John. Let's see if this is... Jesus is addressing Peter here about the feed my sheep. This is John 21, verse 18. Very truly I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. Then he said to him, follow me. And I've always kind of thought of that as, okay, that indicates that he's going to probably die a martyr's death, right? But also kind of this, there's an underlying message there that you'll get to the point where you don't get to direct your affairs. That's why sometimes a bad prognosis, the doctor will say you need to get your affairs in order. That's why you need written instructions, a will, an affirmative, a living will, or I'm not thinking of all the words there, but you need those directives that are in place. Because one of these days, these decisions will be out of your hands. And you won't care. I mean, you might care right now, but you're going to get to the point that you won't care. So that all you've got will one day not be yours. It's going to go to somebody else. That land, that house, that car, that collection of whatever it is you collect. You collect anything, Judy? Does she collect anything? I thought so. Whatever that is, it's not going to stay in your reign. Any other thoughts? Here are two bottom line take-home points that I came up with, and I'm open for others too, but that's basically the lesson. One is this: we should never take for granted what we have, what we are, and where we're at in life. I guess that's kind of three thoughts in that one bundled up. Never take for granted what we have, what we are, and where we're at in life. Things tomorrow can be drastically different for any one of us. I'm hoping that it's not, but it can be. This past week, tornadoes came through Little Rock, and my cousin lost part of the roof of his house, his gazebo in the backyard. I've got a picture of the damage, and he was lucky. Some lost their homes. The fires that came through the Oklahoma City area. Nobody woke up that morning thinking tomorrow I'll just be seeing rubble and smoke and cinder. Appreciate what you've got and what you are and where you're at in life right now. And that brings me to the second one, and it really is related to it. Life is short and changes rapidly. Life is short and changes rapidly. And ultimately, we need to quit thinking about material wealth, about, okay, one day it'll be gone. Okay. We need to start thinking about, what about my eternal destiny? That's the more important question. That's what's really important. Is, am I doing, am I preparing, am I giving all diligence to making sure that I am right with God? Because that seems to be, from Daniel 5, the point Daniel is making is, you need to get right with God. You need to stay right with God. And that's my lesson for tonight. Any questions? Goodness, we're 5 minutes early, Jerry. 5 minutes early. I'm never early. No questions? All right, well, Gail, do you have anything? Yeah, it's like, okay, here's your stuff. You're third in rank. It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Well, he's got nowhere else to turn. He's already exhausted the rest of his diviners and magicians and people that were wise, and, you know. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, I think it's something to ponder about, but we need to be careful about making assumptions about what happens with Belshazzar. We know he dies. That doesn't necessarily have to mean that he didn't learn something. And that may be an indicator that, okay, well, here you go. And regardless of whether he relented, repented, or resented, or whatever, the consequence is his life was going to be taken that night. No matter what would happen, even if he'd repented, that can still happen. When somebody gets a prognosis of cancer and then they think, I need to turn my life over to God. And that can happen, right? Even at the last moment. And they're baptized for forgiveness of sins, and they've believed with all their heart. They've done everything genuinely, legitimately, to receive God's grace and mercy, but still die of cancer. I believe we have a God that can heal you of cancer too, but that's not a guarantee just because you become a Christian. It's like people that are in the prison system. They can repent, have true repentance. They can have true salvation. doesn't mean the judge is going to say, okay, now you're a Christian, I'm going to let you out. You may still have a life sentence. You may still have a death sentence that has to be carried out. That's the consequence. I truly believe with all my heart David repented from his sin with Bathsheba, but the life of that child was still demanded. So the consequences can remain. Good point, good question. Because it does seem like he doesn't backlash any. We don't see that. He might have, but we don't see that. And then the next chapter is going to be right into Darius. So there's a lot not documented, a lot we don't know. Yeah, it does seem that there's a little remnant of it, but it's kind of waned. Otherwise, the king, he should have known that. And you would have thought the other magicians would have also said, well, we don't know. But there's this one guy, go ahead. Yeah. 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 We also, go ahead. Mm-hmm. Well, let's admit something as far as the human race is concerned in general. We are forgetful people. You can read the book of Judges and see that. And remember Joseph's story. He was given the promise that I'm going to remember you, because he said, well, just remember me. That's what I want you to do. Well, that doesn't happen for a long time when finally somebody remembers, oh yeah, Joseph could interpret dreams. And he finally gets remembered. But it's waned. And I think that's happened here. Good discussion tonight. Thank y'all. Barbara, you did great. Did she say anything? You did great. Okay. Okay, Remington, tubes in his ear and tonsils out Friday. They're talking about that tube stuff with Benson. Yeah, he keeps grabbing his ear and he's constantly having ear infections. We'll pray for Remington. Thank you. Anyone else? Let's go ahead and close with a prayer then. Father, I thank you for tonight, our lesson in Daniel, and I pray, Father, for Remington and the surgery for his tubes and tonsils being removed, that everything will go okay, and that you just give family peace of mind about this, that it will go well. We continue to pray for Jimmy Hyatt and for David Kersey and Berlin and Norma as well. We pray, Father, for others that are on our prayer list and people that are dealing with pain, dealing with health issues and loss. Father, we're grateful for what we have, for what we are and where we're at. And we never want to take that for granted. And may this story remind us tonight that we need to always be constantly reminded of all of our blessings and always give credit to you for what we have. And thank you most of all for Jesus and the sacrifice he made on the cross. That's the most important and most valuable thing that any of us can latch on to. May we never forget that. It's our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.